There is a moment, late at night, when the house goes quiet and the noise of the day finally stops, that you feel it. The ache you've been out running since morning, the weight you smiled through in front of other people, the tears you swallowed because it wasn't the right time, or the right place, or you simply didn't want to be seen. And in that quiet, you might wonder, does anyone actually know what this feels like? Not the version you performed for everyone else, not the summary you gave when someone asked, "How are you?" and you said, "I'm fine," because that was easier than explaining. Does anyone know the real weight? Tonight, I want to tell you something, and I want you to let it settle, slowly, the way truth does when it's finally allowed to land. God knows, not in a vague, distant, sentimental way, not the way we sometimes say things to comfort ourselves without really believing them. God knows, specifically, intimately, completely. He knows the pain you haven't said out loud. He knows the version of the story you haven't told anyone, because some things feel too heavy to hand to another person. He knows the tears you cried into a pillow so no one would hear. He knows the ones you didn't even let yourself cry, because you were too busy holding everything together for everyone else. He was there, not watching from a distance like a spectator to your suffering, but present, near, aware of every detail. The scriptures describe him as one who is close to the brokenhearted, and I don't think that's just poetic language. I think it's a description of a father who does not turn away when his children are in pain, who does not flinch at your grief, who does not require you to clean yourself up before you come to him. So much of our lives, we've learned to manage our emotions in front of others. We've learned which feelings are acceptable to show, and which ones we should tuck away. We've learned to perform strength, because vulnerability so often gets met with discomfort, or judgment, or silence. And slowly, without meaning to, we start doing the same thing to God. We show up polished. We pray the version of our pain that sounds acceptable. We leave out the anger. We leave out the exhaustion. We leave out the parts of us that feel too messy, too human, too much. But here is the truth I want you to receive tonight. God is not asking for the polished version. He never was. He is not intimidated by your anger. He is not overwhelmed by your grief. He is not put off by your doubt, your confusion, your exhaustion, your questions that don't have neat answers. He made you with the capacity to feel deeply, and that capacity was never a flaw to be corrected. It was part of how he designed you to move through this world, to connect, to grieve, to love, to hope. Think about the emotional range woven throughout the story of Scripture. Men and women crying out in anguish, voices filled with confusion, asking why suffering continues, why the wicked seem to prosper, why prayers feel unanswered. There is no sanitized version of the human experience in that story. There is lament, there is longing, there is fear. There is joy so full it spills into songs and dancing. There is grief so heavy it's described as bones wasting away. If God recorded all of that, preserved it, included it as part of the sacred story, then he is not asking you to hide your emotions from him. He's inviting you to bring them. I want you to think for a moment about someone you trust completely, someone who has never made you feel small for crying, someone who has never rushed you past your pain toward a quick resolution, someone who just stays, sits with you, doesn't need you to explain yourself perfectly. That is a small, human, imperfect reflection of something much larger. God is the origin of that kind of presence. He is the safest place your pain could ever go. And yet so many of us treat him like the last resort. We try to fix things ourselves first. We try to numb the ache with distraction, with busyness, with anything that promises relief, even temporarily. We go to people before we go to Him, not because people are wrong to lean on, but because somewhere along the way we started believing God was too holy, too far away, too occupied with bigger things to care about the details of our sorrow. But nothing could be further from the truth. He counts things about you that you've never counted yourself. He knows numbers you'll never know, details so small they seem insignificant. And yet He holds them. If He is attentive to that level of detail, do you really think your pain slips past Him unnoticed? Do you really think the nights you cried yourself to sleep went unseen? Do you really think the anxiety pressing on your chest right now, this very moment, is somehow invisible to Him? It isn't. He sees it, He knows it, and more than that, He is moved by it. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from feeling misunderstood. You try to explain what you're going through, and the words come out wrong, or the person listening nods along, but you can tell they don't really get it. Maybe they've never walked through what you're walking through. Maybe they mean well, but their comfort feels hollow, because it's built on sympathy rather than true understanding. God does not have that limitation. He is not sympathizing from a distance. He entered into human experience, fully, completely, willingly. He knows what it is to grieve a friend. He knows what it is to feel abandoned by people who should have stood by him. He knows what it is to be exhausted, to weep, to feel the weight of sorrow so heavy it presses tears from your eyes in a garden at night while everyone else sleeps. He knows betrayal. He knows physical pain. He knows what it is to cry out and feel, in that moment, forsaken. So when you come to Him with your pain, you are not coming to someone who has to imagine what it's like. You are coming to someone who has lived it, who understands the particular shape of your suffering, because He has walked through suffering Himself. This is not a distant deity issuing pain management advice from a throne untouched by hardship. This is a Father who knows, intimately, what it costs to carry grief. And because He knows, He does not ask you to minimize what you're feeling. He does not ask you to rush toward gratitude before you've allowed yourself to grieve. He does not require you to skip the hard parts to get to the healed parts. He simply asks you to bring it to Him. All of it. The anger you feel about things you never got to say, the disappointment about how certain relationships ended, the confusion about why some prayers seem to go unanswered for so long, the exhaustion of carrying responsibilities that never seem to lighten, the quiet grief of watching people you love change, or leave, or hurt you in ways you never expected, the fear that keeps you awake, replaying worst-case scenarios, the shame that whispers you are too much, or not enough, or somehow responsible for pain that was never yours to carry. Bring it all, not because He needs the information. He already knows, but because you need the release. Because there is something that happens in the human soul when pain is finally spoken instead of buried, when it's handed over instead of carried alone. Something shifts, not always immediately, not always in a way you can measure right away. But something shifts. I think about how differently we might live if we truly believed God was present in our pain rather than distant from it. If instead of hiding our tears from Him, we let Him witness them. If instead of pretending to be fine in prayer, we told Him the truth. If instead of waiting until we had the right words, we simply came as we were, broken sentences and all, unfinished thoughts and all, anger and confusion and grief tangled together in a way that doesn't make sense, but is still honest. He can hold that. He has always been able to hold that. There's a kind of relief that comes from being fully known and still fully loved. Most human relationships can't offer that. Not perfectly. We hide parts of ourselves, even from people closest to us, because we're afraid that if they saw everything, they might not stay. But God already sees everything. He has always seen everything, and He stays. That is not conditional love waiting for you to earn it by managing your emotions well. That is steady, unwavering, present love, offered to you in the middle of your mess, not after you've cleaned it up. If you are in a season right now where your emotions feel too big, too tangled, too much to explain, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too much for God. Your grief is not an inconvenience to Him. Your anger is not a threat to His holiness. Your doubt does not disqualify you from His presence. Your exhaustion is not evidence of weak faith. It's evidence that you are human, living in a world that is often heavy, and reaching toward a God who is bigger than the heaviness. Let yourself feel what you feel tonight. Don't rush past it. Don't perform your way through it for an audience that isn't even watching. Just feel it, honestly, in the presence of the one who already knows it anyway. And as you feel it, know this. He is not far off. He is not indifferent. He is not waiting for you to compose yourself before He'll draw near. He draws near now, in the mess, in the unfinished sentences, in the tears you can't quite explain, in the anger you don't know what to do with, in the grief that doesn't have words yet. He is near to the broken-hearted, not near to the ones who've already healed and cleaned up their story for public consumption. Near to the broken-hearted, right now, as you are. Consider what it might mean to actually rest in that, rather than just knowing it as information. To let your body exhale, to let your shoulders drop from wherever they've been holding tension for weeks, maybe months. To stop performing peace you don't feel, and instead receive the kind of peace that comes from being known and held at the same time. This doesn't mean your circumstances change instantly. Pain often lingers longer than we'd like. Grief has its own timeline, one that doesn't bend to our impatience. Healing is rarely a straight line. But even while the circumstances remain hard, there is a difference between carrying pain alone and carrying it with someone who understands, who is present, who is not going anywhere. You were never meant to carry this by yourself, not the pain from years ago that still surfaces sometimes without warning, not the grief you thought you'd processed but occasionally catches you off guard, not the disappointment simmering under the surface of your daily life, not the fear about what's coming next. None of it was meant to be carried alone. God knew this about you before you were even formed. He knew the seasons you would walk through, the losses you would face, the nights you would lie awake wondering if anyone truly understood. And knowing all of that, He still chose to be present, still chose to draw near, still chose to offer Himself as the place where your pain could finally be set down, even if only for a moment, even if the weight returns tomorrow. Tonight, let this be enough. Let it be enough to know that you are seen, that your emotions, all of them, are not a burden to Him, that your pain has never gone unnoticed, that every tear you've cried in private has been witnessed by someone who cares more about you than you've ever fully understood. You don't have to explain yourself perfectly. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to wait until you feel strong enough to approach Him. Come as you are, tired, hurting, uncertain, and let yourself be met exactly there. He knows your pain. He knows your joy. He knows the anger you haven't voiced and the sorrow you haven't named. He knows every layer of what you're carrying tonight, and He is not overwhelmed by any of it. Rest in that. Breathe in that. Let the quiet around you tonight become a space not of isolation, but of presence. Because you are not alone in this. You never were. Let your heart settle now. Let the tension in your body ease. Let whatever you've been holding on to tonight begin to loosen, just a little, in the presence of the one who already knows and already stays. You are known. You are seen. You are held. And that, tonight, is enough. But let's stay here a little longer, because I think there's more to uncover about what it actually means for God to know your emotions, not just acknowledge them, but know them the way only He can. Think about the last time someone tried to comfort you, and it fell flat. Maybe they said all the right words. Maybe they quoted the right verse, or offered the right advice, or told you it would all work out. And maybe none of it touched the actual ache, because comfort that doesn't come from real understanding often bounces off the surface. It sounds nice. It just doesn't land. That is not how God comforts. He doesn't comfort you from a script. He doesn't offer generic reassurance because He doesn't know what else to say. When He meets you in your pain, it is specific, it is personal. It is shaped exactly to the contour of what you're carrying, because He formed that contour in the first place. He knows the particular shape of your sorrow because He knows the particular shape of you. This is worth sitting with. So much of the comfort we receive from other people, even well-meaning people, is filtered through their own experiences, their own limitations, their own discomfort with pain. But God's comfort isn't filtered through anything. It comes directly from a source that already understands the full weight of what you're carrying, without you needing to translate it for Him first. Have you ever tried to explain your pain to someone and felt the exhaustion of having to translate it, simplify it, make it digestible for them? You wanted to be understood, but you also had to do the work of making yourself understandable. That's an exhausting kind of labor, especially when you're already worn down. With God, there is no translation required. He doesn't need you to make your pain digestible. He already knows the raw, unfiltered version. You can stop performing clarity you don't have. You can stop trying to make your grief sound reasonable. You can bring Him the tangled, confusing, contradictory mess of what you're actually feeling, and He will not ask you to clean it up first. I want to talk for a moment about the emotions we're taught to suppress the most: anger and doubt. So often in faith spaces, these two feelings get treated as spiritual failures, as if a mature believer should never feel angry at their circumstances, never question why God allows certain things to happen, never wrestle with confusion about unanswered prayer. But wrestling is not the opposite of faith. Sometimes wrestling is faith, in its most honest form. Consider how many figures throughout Scripture argued with God, questioned Him, expressed frustration at the timeline of His promises, and were not struck down for it. They were met, engaged, sometimes corrected, but never dismissed. Their honesty was not a barrier to relationship with God. It was often the doorway into deeper relationship with Him. If you're angry right now, angry about a diagnosis, a loss, a betrayal, a door that closed when you prayed so hard for it to open, you don't have to hide that anger from God to remain in good standing with Him. He can hold your anger. He is not fragile. He is not threatened by your honesty. What He wants is your presence, not your performance. And if you're doubting, if you've been quietly wondering whether any of this is even true, whether prayers actually reach anywhere, whether you're just talking to silence, I want you to know that doubt voiced honestly to God is not the same as walking away from Him. Often the most sacred conversations happen exactly in that tension, the place where faith and doubt sit side by side, uncomfortable but honest. He is not waiting for you to have it all figured out before He'll engage with you. He's not waiting for certainty. He's meeting you in the question. Now I want to shift for a moment, to talk about the emotions that don't get spoken about as often, the quieter ones. The low-grade sadness that doesn't have a clear cause, the flatness that sets in after a season of striving, the numbness that shows up when you've been strong for too long without a break, the strange guilt you feel for struggling when other people seem to have it worse. These emotions are harder to name, because they don't announce themselves the way acute grief or sharp anger do. They creep in quietly. They sit underneath your daily functioning, humming faintly, easy to ignore until you're lying awake at night and suddenly aware of how tired your soul actually is. God knows this exhaustion too. Not just the dramatic pain, the quiet, cumulative kind. The pain of simply carrying life for a long time without rest. The pain of showing up for everyone else while no one shows up for you in the same way. The pain of feeling invisible in your own struggle because you've become so good at hiding it. He sees the parts of your story that no one else has noticed. He sees the effort behind your ordinary days. He sees how much strength it takes just to keep going when nothing dramatic is wrong, but everything feels heavier than it should. You don't need a crisis to qualify for his attention. You don't have to wait until things fall apart dramatically before you're allowed to come to him. He is present in the mundane exhaustion just as much as he is present in the catastrophic loss. Both matter to him. Both are seen by him. I think one of the enemy's oldest strategies is convincing us that our pain isn't significant enough to bring to God, that he's busy with bigger things, wars, disasters, the suffering of entire nations, and our individual sadness is too small to matter. But that's not how his attention works. He is not a limited resource being divided among competing needs. He is fully present with each person, fully attentive to each story, without diminishing his attention to anyone else's. Your pain is not competing for space in his awareness. There is room for all of it. There is room for you. So tonight, whatever you've been minimizing, whatever you've told yourself isn't a big enough deal to bring to God, I want you to bring it anyway. The quiet sadness, the unexplained heaviness, the disappointment you've never voiced out loud, the grief you've told yourself you should be over by now. Bring it. Let it matter, because it matters to him. There's something else I want you to consider. The way God responds to pain is different from the way we often expect him to. We sometimes assume that if he truly cared, he would remove the pain immediately. That love should look like instant rescue. But throughout the story of Scripture, his presence often looks less like immediate removal and more like steady companionship through the process. He walked with people through valleys, rather than teleporting them past the valleys entirely. He was present in the furnace, not just after it. He was present during the storm, not just once it calmed. This tells us something important about how he tends to work in our own lives too. Sometimes his presence means the pain lifts quickly. Often, though, his presence means you are not alone while the pain runs its course. That distinction matters, because if you're waiting for the ache to disappear before you believe God is near, you might be missing the ways he is already near, right in the middle of it. His nearness is not always measured by the absence of pain. Sometimes it's measured by the presence of peace inside the pain. A peace that doesn't erase what you're feeling but somehow coexists with it. Have you experienced that before? A moment where the circumstances hadn't changed at all, but something inside you settled anyway. A strange, unexplainable steadiness in the middle of chaos. That's not something you manufacture on your own. That's the kind of peace that comes from somewhere outside yourself. A peace the world cannot replicate or fully explain. I want to close this time together with an invitation, not a formula, not a 5-step process to feel better, just an invitation to be honest. Tonight, before you fall asleep, consider speaking to God the way you would speak to someone who already knows everything and loves you anyway. Tell him what you've been avoiding saying out loud. Tell him about the anger, the confusion, the sadness that doesn't seem to have a clear reason. Tell him about the exhaustion of holding everything together for everyone else. Tell him the version of your day that you didn't share with anyone. You don't need eloquent words. You don't need to organize your thoughts first. You can start in the middle. You can start with a single sentence, even a single word. He is not grading the presentation. He is receiving the honesty. And as you do this, as you let yourself be fully known, I want you to notice what happens in your body. Notice whether your breathing slows. Notice whether the tightness in your chest eases even slightly. Notice whether the isolation you've been feeling begins to soften, replaced by the quiet awareness that you are not carrying this alone. You were never meant to carry it alone. He knew your pain before you felt it. He knew this exact season, this exact night, this exact weight, long before you arrived here. And knowing all of it, he still calls you close, still invites you in, still holds space for every emotion you carry without asking you to minimize a single one of them. So let yourself feel what you feel. Let yourself grieve what needs to be grieved. Let yourself be angry where anger is honest. Let yourself doubt where doubt is real. And in the middle of all of it, let yourself be found by a God who has never once turned away from you. You are known. You are seen. You are held. Rest now, not because everything is resolved, but because you are not alone in the unresolved. Let that be enough for tonight. Before we close completely, I want to speak to something specific, something I think many of you carry without ever giving it a name. The feeling of being emotionally tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You wake up, and the tiredness is still there, not in your body but somewhere deeper. A tiredness of the soul. This kind of exhaustion often comes from carrying emotions for too long without release. Maybe you learned early in life that your feelings were inconvenient to the people around you. Maybe you learned to shrink your reactions so you wouldn't be seen as too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. And so you built a habit of swallowing what you felt, storing it somewhere out of sight, hoping it would eventually dissolve on its own. But emotions rarely dissolve just because we ignore them. They tend to wait. They resurface in unexpected moments, in irritability you can't explain, in tears that come out of nowhere over something small, in a heaviness that follows you through ordinary days for no clear reason. God is not asking you to keep storing what you feel. He's not asking you to keep performing composure while quietly running out of capacity. He is inviting you to release what you've been holding, not because releasing it will make everything instantly better, but because you were never designed to carry it alone in the first place. Think about what it might look like to actually practice this. Not just as a concept you agree with, but as something you do regularly. What if part of your relationship with God included honest emotional expression as a normal, expected part of prayer? Not just requests, not just gratitude, but genuine processing. Telling him what today actually felt like, without editing it into something more acceptable. This kind of honesty doesn't diminish your faith. It deepens it. Because faith that only shows up polished isn't really faith being tested and proven. It's faith being performed. Real faith includes the nights you don't understand what he's doing. Real faith includes the moments you're angry and still choose to stay in the conversation instead of walking away. Real faith includes bringing your whole self, not the curated version, into his presence. I think about how children process big emotions before they've learned to suppress them. They cry loudly when something hurts. They express frustration without shame. They don't yet carry the self-consciousness adults often develop around vulnerability. There's something instructive in that. Somewhere along the way, most of us learned to be embarrassed by our own feelings. We learned that crying too much, needing too much, feeling too deeply, made other people uncomfortable. So we adjusted ourselves to be more manageable. But God never asked you to be manageable. He asked you to be honest. If tonight you're carrying something you haven't told anyone, something that feels too heavy or too embarrassing or too complicated to explain, I want you to know that you don't have to carry the burden of explaining it perfectly. You can bring the confusion exactly as it is. You can bring the parts that don't make sense yet. You can bring the questions you're afraid to ask out loud because you're worried about what the answer might be. He can hold all of it, not because he's obligated to, because he chooses to. Because that is who he is. There's a kind of relief that comes when you stop performing wellness you don't feel, when you stop rehearsing the acceptable version of your struggle, when you finally let the truth be the truth, even if it's messy, even if it's unresolved, even if it doesn't have a clean conclusion yet. You don't need a resolution to be met by him. You don't need to have processed your grief fully before he'll draw near. You don't need to have forgiven someone yet, or made peace with a loss yet, or figured out the next steps yet. He meets you in the middle of the process, not just at the finish line. So if you're in the middle tonight, in the confusion, in the unresolved anger, in the grief that hasn't found its shape yet, you are not behind. You are not failing at healing. You are exactly where you are, and that is where he meets you. Let this be a season where you stop hiding your emotions from the one who already knows them anyway. Let this be a season where honesty becomes part of your prayer life, not as a last resort when things fall apart, but as a regular practice of bringing your real self into his presence. He is not intimidated by your depth of feeling. He created you with that depth on purpose. Your capacity to feel deeply is not a flaw in your design. It's part of how you were made to connect, to love, to grieve well, to celebrate fully. That same capacity that makes pain feel so heavy is the same capacity that allows you to experience joy so completely. Don't ask him to shrink your emotional world down to something smaller and safer. Ask him instead to walk with you through the fullness of it. The pain and the joy, the grief and the gratitude, the doubt and the faith existing together, imperfectly, honestly, in a life that is still being lived. You are known in all of it, every layer, every contradiction, every unresolved question, and you are held in all of it too. Let that truth be the last thing you carry into rest tonight. Not a resolution, not an answer to every question. Just the quiet certainty that you are not alone, that your emotions are not too much, and that the God who made you is not going anywhere. Rest now.